Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Food Marketing Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Resch, and I'm delighted to have you with us today. Whether you're enjoying a refreshing morning coffee or savoring the flavors of a smoothie, this podcast is your all-access pass to the vibrant and ever-evolving world of food marketing. Joining me is the insightful and always engaging Holden Rouse.
Absolutely, Doug. We're here to infuse your day with tales of creativity, strategic branding, and the ingenious elements that make food brands stand out. Today, we're diving into the realm of consumer insights, a sector that's buzzing with innovation and new players who are shaking up the market.
And what better way to digest these trends than with insights straight from the source? Today, we're joined by a special guest who's at the forefront of consumer insights in the food industry. Please welcome Dr. Arwen Kimmell. She's the founder of Insomnia Insights, a platform dedicated to enhancing our understanding of consumer insights. She's a researcher, a clinician, and a thought leader with a passion for helping people achieve the insights they need to drive brand growth. So whether you're a marketing professional, a food industry enthusiast, or just someone curious about the latest food trends, you're in for a flavorful journey. Let's get ready to uncover the consumer insights that are transforming the food landscape with Dr. Arwen Kimmell on the Food Marketing Mindset Podcast. Dr. Kimmell, can you share how your background in cultural anthropology and linguistics has shaped your approach to consumer insights in the CPG space?
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a great question. A lot of people come to consumer insights with a background in marketing. They have an MBA or a degree in business, and then they have to learn about consumer behavior and insights. I come to it with a PhD in anthropology and a background in linguistics, and then I had to learn business. So like Excel is not my first language. There are a lot of things that I had to learn once I made the transition to business. In the end, I think there's a lot of overlap between the way an MBA does insights and the way I do, but there are some things that I bring that are different and I approach that are different. I'm more likely to talk about colonialism and semiotics than some of my colleagues are. And I do think that I take a broader cultural view than some insights folks do. I was the insights lead for Kashi for a very long time, and I did a program called Kashi College, where every new employee, every new agency had to go through an hour or two with Arwen before they could work on the brand. And, Kashi's a brand that was founded in the 80s. We were having these conversations in 2015, 2017, 2020. And I started every presentation with a slide that started in the 60s because I didn't feel like we could really understand the natural and organic consumer in 2020 without first really understanding where the natural and organic movement came from, and that it was born in this context of the civil rights movement and the rise of environmentalism and feminism, and that those movements really impacted the consumer today. And so I don't know that my peers would have made everybody go back to school and talk about, the rise of feminism in the 60s when they were talking about their brand history, but I certainly did.
Now, with your experience in trend tracking and talking about these consumer behavior shifts, what's the most surprising one recently that you've discovered, and how should brands respond to them?
In hindsight, very little is surprising. You can always sort of go back and go, yeah, here were the signs. Here's what we were looking at. But I think there is a very cool collision happening right now in that world of natural and organic. For years and years, consumers were driving brands to be more simple. They wanted clean ingredients, they wanted natural ingredients, they wanted fewer ingredients on the label. And that's still true. They do. That sort of drive towards simple and natural and real is true. But at the same time, we've got technology sort of smashing into natural. So think about something like lab-grown meat. Lab-grown meat is likely to try and speak to the same consumer that is buying a natural and organic product today and wants simple and clean, because they want to save the world, right? They want the environmental benefits of something like lab-grown meat. But lab-grown meat is, like, by definition, not sort of simple and clean and real in the same way that, the veggies growing in my garden are. And so it's a very cool thing to watch from a an insight and culture perspective. How are these things going to come together, and how are brands going to reconcile the fact that consumers want simple, clean, and real, but they are also intrigued by and interested in something like lab-grown meat?
That's really interesting that you bring up lab-grown meat. I think that's a hot topic right now,
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
mycelium, all that stuff, right? So
Yeah.
when you look at like the innovation that you've experienced as well, even with a big company like Kashi, how do
Yeah.
you recommend brands use consumer insights to drive those innovation strategies to get their brands off the ground?
Yeah, there are a ton of places in the innovation process where research and insights and thinking about your consumer is really important. I think there are three big buckets of places where you should think about the consumer. One is kind of before you innovate. If you really understand and build empathy for who you're building something for, then everything else is easier because you know what it is that they're looking for, and you know that what you're building is solving a need, and you know sort of how to build that. So I think that upfront foundational knowledge about who your consumer is really key to innovation. The second place is making choices. And I don't believe that you need to test every option and every decision in an innovation needs to be tested with consumers. But there are times when you've got a choice between formulation A and formulation B, or package, claim A and package claim B, or flavor A, B, C, D, E. And getting a pulse check from your consumer about which of those options is going to be more compelling can really set your innovation up for more success than if you just guess or go with your own perspective on what might be the best thing. So that's sort of the second bucket, is to help you make choices. The third is, have you delivered? Have you fulfilled what you set out to do? Are you fulfilling the job to be done? Does your food taste good? Did you create something that people are willing to pay for and willing to trade off for something else for? And whether you do that piece with research or you do it in market, consumers are going to tell you whether or not you've delivered and you've created something that they're willing to give you their money for.
Oh, that's really good. I want to touch back on the first one with consumer empathy.
Yeah.
And I'd love an example on how a brand successfully built empathy with the consumer and what impact may that have had on their decision-making processes.
Yeah. I think of like 90% of my job is building empathy and helping brands and team members to really understand. That was the whole point of Kashi College, right? Taking people back to the 60s to really understand, for a natural and organic consumer, food is a choice that's so foundational to who they are. It's part of their identity. And if you don't really understand that and appreciate that, it's hard to understand their behavior later. So I think, empathy can come from all kinds of places. The sort of default is let's go in home and spend time with folks. That's one way to do it. You can do it online. You can do it through social listening. You can do it through sales data. I think there are a lot of pieces that come together to build empathy. I think, one of the reasons that emerging, brands have been able to disrupt so many big companies is that they come from a place of empathy. Most founders are building a product and a brand kind of for them or for their kids or for their inner circle. And so empathy is baked in. And so they don't need to go ask a consumer what the right flavor is or what the right claim is, because they know sort of in their soul what the right claim is. And that works until they have to grow beyond themselves, right? And then they have to start speaking to somebody else. Founders are able to move fast and make decisions because they have that empathy sort of with their inner circle. It gets harder for them once they start to scale and need to speak to somebody that's outside of that sort of core circle. Then they need to start building the empathy muscle to be able to speak to somebody that's outside of that inner circle. For larger companies, building empathy with their consumer allows them to move faster and make better decisions. They don't need to test everything. They don't need to sort of think too hard about what the consumer would want because they've really spent time getting to know who they are. And it allows them to spend less money and do less research, but still make really solid consumer-driven decisions.
So you talk about emerging brands and then large companies. You've worked for both. I think we've both worked for both as well, right? So what do you think are the unique challenges and some of the opportunities that exist when it comes to gathering insights for both emerging and large companies?
Yeah. The short answer is, big companies have access to a ton of data and information, and emerging brands usually don't. They may not have any data and information, or they may have very select information. I think that leads to behavior on both sides that's maybe not great. I think for large companies, because they do have so much data, they become kind of overly reliant on having a reassuring sort of data point to support every decision. And you don't always need to sort of over research. It's not your insights person's telling you, maybe need to do research on that. I think on the emerging brand side, I think they get so used to not having information, not having data, not having insights, that they don't think they need them or don't have time or money for them. And so they don't realize that a little can go a long way. And there are really inexpensive, fast ways to connect with your consumer. And it doesn't have to be six-figure research study or a full-time insights person. And so I think the risk is that big company does too much and doesn't lean on their intuition enough, and the little company probably leans on their intuition too much.
So data analysis is a big part of consumer insights, as you're mentioning. Can you walk us through a little bit on how to turn data into actionable strategies for CPG brands?
Yeah, it's art and science. There's not a one playbook to really getting from data to insights. I think the first lesson I would give is that data comes in all shapes and sizes. Just consumer research is data, observations are data, the marketplace is data, the conversations you're having on the street when you're sampling with your consumer are data. And so getting too tunnel visioned on one kind of data or one data source can really be a misstep, because you're unlikely to see that whole picture. I think once you've got a collection of information, data from a lot of different sources, whatever sources you have available, my process is to sort of look for both themes and the outlier. I think there is strategy and insight and action to be found in sort of the average. What are those things that you're hearing a lot, seeing a lot? Sort of what is that kind of mainstream view? And then what is that outlying sort of data point that doesn't make any sense? Or if you're doing, focus groups, there's that weird guy in the corner that isn't like anybody else. He might really have something important to say. And so taking and balancing both the theme, what is, and those are kind of easy to emerge, but then filtering in what is that outlier, what is that exception, and how do those work together to help point you in a direction.
You talked about focus groups. I was in an example of a focus group where somebody had spearheaded the entire focus group away from like groupthink, right? Or mirroring it into groupthink, right? Where he was pushing people in and saying, no, this is what it was, and facts. And we were behind the mirror and we were Googling everything he was saying, like this statistic, that statistic, and none of them ever existed. But everybody in the room was shifted around what he was saying, and then their whole mindset evolved into this is fact, right?
Yeah.
And it's amazing to see how people can do that.
Yeah.
But you were talking about, or sorry, go.
Oh no, so that's
go ahead,
happened, and
respond.
then that guy goes online and has a presence, and then those things become real, right? Like that influence moves
Yes,
beyond the
yeah,
focus
yeah.
group.
Exactly. So talking a little bit about like influence and consumer insights evolving. Obviously with AI and the rise of technology,
Yeah.
big data, all that stuff. Where do you see all of this going in your eyes?
It's a lot of it is really exciting. You're able to move faster. You can synthesize data way faster. Those themes are way easier to find when you can, dump your transcripts or your open-ended, answers into a system, and it spits out a slide for you of what those themes are. I think that the danger is there's a data point for every perspective. And you can find data to support anything that you think. And so while it's easier and faster to get access to information and access to data, I think having responsible expert, unbiased research partners that can look at that and go, okay, here is the 95% of this you need to filter out and ignore. And here is the 5% that we should actually be paying attention to. I think that's really important. Just because you can ask ChatGPT to answer your question doesn't mean that's the right answer to help drive your brand strategy.
That's really good insights. And I want to touch a little bit on rebranding. I know you've worked with some really big customers in the past on rebranding.
Yeah.
So can you share some of the insights and consumer behavior and how that influenced that whole process?
Yeah, one of the brands that I worked closely on was Pure Organic and that rebrand, and that was a fun one. I don't know how familiar you are with the brand, but it's a lovely brand with a lovely founding story. The founder is a woman named Veronica, and she built the brand because her daughter, went to a petting zoo as a part of an elementary school field trip and came home and said she wants to be a vegetarian. Right. So, and Veronica wanted to honor that choice that her child was making, but it was really hard to feed a kid a vegetarian diet in the 90s in rural Michigan. And so she created this line of nutrition bars that she was making in her home to put in her kid's lunchbox because she wanted real nutrient dense, clean, healthy food for this vegetarian child. And she grew the brand, right? This is a brand that was rooted in real clean nutrition. And she grew it and it was wonderful. She expanded into categories outside of nutrition bars, and eventually Kellogg acquired, which is when I started working on the brand. And over time, the brand evolved and consumer behavior changed. And she had this product that was called layered fruit bars. It was kind of an elevated, a little bit more sophisticated fruit snack. We heard a lot about this is like your golf bag fruit snack. This is not like, something animal shaped. They were great flavors and they were growing like wildfire. And then we looked at that and said, the consumer is screaming at us that there is something really powerful in this layered fruit bar. And so when we were at the point of rebrand, we leaned into this offering that was pretty far away from a nutrient dense, date-based bar. It was more of an indulgent, joyful fruit snack. And so the rebranding pivoted and moved away from something that really felt sort of natural and wholesome and nurturing into something that was way more fun and way more energetic, and really created a home for this product that consumers were telling us had some real potential.
It's a great story, and I've had the brand before. It tastes amazing, so I like the rebranding that you worked through. You talked earlier about the challenges of either too much data, not enough data. How do you think you strike the right balance, and what methods do a brand use or a CPG company use to ensure the data leads to actionable insights when it comes to their marketing strategies afterwards?
Yeah. I like to balance the scales with risk on one side and rigor on the other. So there are decisions, projects, initiatives that are inherently risky and have a larger sort of dollar amount or investment behind them. So think about if you're doing an innovation and it's going to require a significant capital investment, or millions of dollars in slotting fees, or you're launching an advertising campaign and you're going to put $5 million against a TV spot. Those things are riskier. And so I might recommend a more robust research plan behind those to help mitigate those risks. Similarly, or along the same lines, there are things that you're already really knowledgeable about. So if you're doing a line extension on a successful platform, you already know a lot. You know a lot about the food format. You know how to make it. You know what people like today. And so it probably requires less research than something that's really new to the world, or that your team doesn't really know how to make, or your manufacturing facility has never made before. And so having more rigor on those things that are riskier makes a whole lot of sense. if it's really low risk, my answer might be you don't need new data. Let's triangulate some data points that exist in the world and send you on your way. And you don't need to spend more money might be the answer if it's a really low risk project.
Yeah. And I actually want to dive back into some of what Insomnia Insights has to offer.
Sure.
You guys offer a variety of different support options like fractional and project-based support. Can you elaborate how a brand can determine the level of support they need?
Yeah. I started Insomnia Insights because I thought that there were brands out there that were big enough to have problems and big enough to benefit from some research, but were not big enough to require a full-time insights person or a large insights budget. And so a lot of what I do is for that group of brands, that don't have somebody on staff already. They've got a marketing team, but they don't have insights. And for those brands, it's a question of how many questions do you have? How many big innovation projects do you have? What's your team look like? What's your budget look like? And often we'll start with a project, a discrete individual project, but then that could turn into an ongoing retainer when, they want to continue to be able to access my time on a, very small, amount of commitment and a very small amount of dollars, but are able to reach out and ask me questions or ask me to mine data or interpret something. So I think for those smaller brands, that's usually project-based or like a retainer where I function as your insights person. I have done work for larger companies. Those guys usually have an insights team that's very established. And so the role that I will play for those kinds of teams is usually like a pressure relief valve where they need an extra set of experienced hands that can come in and fill a gap or expand capacity when they don't have the ability to answer all of the team's questions at a given period of time.
So since I'm a marketing guy and I really love the idea of naming and branding and all that fun stuff, right? The name Insomnia Insights, quite intriguing, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about the story behind that and then how did it reflect the mission of your consultancy as well?
Yeah, I am one of those people who will be awake at 2 a.m. with data spinning in my mind as I try and sort of solve through a problem. I'm also the kind of person who will wake up at 2 a.m. with the answer fully formed. Whatever has been working in my sleep. So that's part of the Insomnia Insights name. I think the better answer, or the more client facing or outward facing answer, is that there are questions and problems that keep founders and marketers and brand owners up at night. And I want to be that person that can help answer those questions that are keeping you up at night and help you sleep a little better. I've had really mixed reactions to the name. Most people really, really like the name. I think the best feedback I have gotten was from a marketing VP who said, "Well, you're like melatonin for marketers." I was like, I am.
I love it.
I
That's
am.
great.
That's amazing. So as a non-marketing person,
Yeah.
so my background's R&D. I would like to know, how do you approach the challenges of translating complex data into a narrative that can be easily understood and acted upon by someone like myself?
Yeah, the first thing is never stop with data. Always push through to the so what. Because the so what is really usually all that matters. That being said, I think it's really important to know your audience. I have worked with teams that need the numbers. They need the numbers. And so you have to give them, the chart with statistical significance, and that's what they need to feel like they've answered the question. I've worked with other teams that are far more moved by a really, really compelling consumer quote. And the numbers, they trust that you did the math and the numbers are there, but what's really going to impact them is seeing that actual consumer and that empathy that they can build with the consumer. So I think depending on who that audience is, leaning in more to the numbers, leaning in more to sort of the narrative can really help the message land in a much better way.
Well, that's very good insights. And I think what I'd like to talk about a little bit too, and for those brands that are just starting out, right, and they're trying to delve into the consumer insights world, a lot of times they don't know what they're doing or how to do that, right? Or they pick up a report on Food Navigator for Business News, like you know, the article in the general public. What would you recommend for those first steps that they take that would help them align their strategy and build structure? Obviously, besides
hiring me,
talking to Insomnia Insights as well, hiring
right.
you and doing that would be their first step. Is they should definitely call you and go from there. That's obvious. Right?
Obviously, yeah. No, I think, usually the first data that a brand has is sales data. Whether that's shipments or it's some, a spins report or a retailer download of where sales are coming from and going. And I think most of the time, people are not fully sort of digesting and digging into that sales data. There's a lot you can learn from those data sources. And so I think first I would say, what do you have already? And are you like squeezing every bit of life and insight out of the data that you have access to? Because you're probably not. Like there's probably something you could be learning in things that you already have that you haven't unlocked yet. The next step I would say is, how well do you know your consumer? I have worked with established brands that don't know who they're talking to. And so do you really know who buys you today? Do you know who you want to buy you tomorrow? And then what do you know about those people? Because you really need to start thinking about who they are in order to grow, in order to make new offerings for them, in order to grow with that next ring of consumers that you haven't unlocked today. So I think really thinking about the who and how much you know about them. And then, sort of circling back to, you should have a conversation with Arwen is, what does keep you up at night? What are those decisions that you're sweating? Because that's a place where you can start to build some knowledge and make you more comfortable. Research doesn't make decisions. Teams make decisions. Research makes you smarter. So is there a place where you don't feel like you have enough information, or you could be a little smarter and sleep a little better, feel more confident in your decisions? That's where I would spend your time and money.
Nice. I love that. That's a great answer. Okay, Dr. Kimmell, I want to know, in your experience, what are some common misconceptions about consumer insights that you frequently encounter?
Yeah, the two big ones are, it costs too much money and it takes too much time. It's gonna slow us down. And I think it can, for sure. I have watched it cost too much money and I've watched it slow teams down. But the reality is the landscape of research offerings has evolved, and there are some really like quick, efficient ways to get consumer feedback. And I have, there are ways that are practically free and practically instant. There are a whole lot of options out there that are reasonable. I've done a lot of projects that are in the, less than $10,000 and delivered in days or weeks. Gone are the days where you needed 50 grand in 12 weeks to do quantitative research. There are fast options out there. And I would say, don't assume that you can't afford it, and don't consume that it's going to disrupt your timeline.
So you talk about the ability to work through various inexpensive ways of listening to consumers and gaining data and all that stuff. Can you share your thoughts on the role of social listening in consumer insights, and then how do you think it complements the traditional research methods that we've seen in the past?
Yeah. Social listening is a great tool. I think it's a great tool to be used in conjunction with other tools. The benefits are that you're using existing data, so you don't have to go out and search for something. You're able to take things that exist in the world and analyze them in new ways. My caution around social listening is that you are you focused your view on a version of people's lives and behavior and attitudes that is framed for public consumption. A lot of innovation comes from solving a consumer's problem or speaking to a need. And often those are not the things people choose to share online. And so I think if you come in with the reminder that what you're seeing in social listening is one camera view, and it's a camera view curated for public consumption, and don't forget that there are other behaviors and challenges and actions that are happening outside of that social media gaze, I think it can be a really great tool.
Nice. And finally, I think we can end on, what's the one piece of advice you would give to brands looking to build a loyal customer base through consumer insights? And what's that secret sauce that Insomnia Insights can provide to help get them there?
Can I give you two?
Yes, please.
Okay. One is a lecture that I give marketers often, which is, you are not normal. By the very nature of the fact that you are working with a brand, that you are a founder, that you have launched something, you are kind of ruined as a consumer. You don't shop the way normal people shop. You don't look at a package the way normal people look at a package. You're not normal. You're not normal demographically either, right? So I think there's a lesson in remembering that I'm not normal, and having taking the time to go and talk to some folks who haven't been ruined by being insiders in this industry, because in the end, those are the people who are going to grow your business. So that's one. You are not normal. And the second is, be crystal clear on who your consumer is. We're living in an era where people are more polarized than ever before. And you can't make assumptions about who you're talking to. And if you choose to sort of speak to the average, you're probably not speaking or connecting with anybody, because people are so clear in their identity on one side or the other of issues. And so if you don't know who it is that you're talking to, you're going to have a really hard time being true to them as you build communication and products and try and connect with those folks out in the world.
I think that speaks so loudly to a lot of brands, is, as you said, right, is reflecting on current trends, and then also the targeted demographic, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to talk to your targeted demographic, because you could talk to friends and family and say, what do you think of this flavor? What do you think of this product, or whatever? But if they're not your target demographic, their opinion, to be honest, doesn't matter, right? Yeah. And so it's the reality of the situation, and I think that's a great way of segueing into, people should look at Insomnia Insights as a way to predict future behaviors of consumers, and I think that's a solid foundation. So I want to say thank you so much, Dr. Kimmell, for being here today.
Yes, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, giving us a solid foundation of consumer insight strategy, and we really appreciate you being here for our audience.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great pleasure to hang out.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap on today's episode with Food Marketing Mindset. I'm Holden Rouse.
And I'm Doug Resch.
And a big thank you to the visionary food marketer who shared their secret sauce with us, Dr. Arwen Kimmell.
Remember, the world of food marketing is everywhere. It's powerful and it's effective.
Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this podcast with fellow innovators. For more delicious content, follow us on our social channels and visit our website. Stay tuned for another serving of Food Marketing Mindset, where your appetite for growth meets the taste of triumph. Stay seasoned, stay inspired, until we meet again on the next episode of Food Marketing Mindset.